One, two, three. No, I got asthma. Okay.
Yeah, I'm holding the camera. I can't clap.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, woo! And I still look good.
You know, you are so bad.
5018. It's water moisturizer.
Welcome to Shanae's Lore. I am Shanae, and today we will be discussing episode 4 of the Haunted Hometown Horror Stories right here on Shanae's Lore. Ha ha ha! Yeah, he say ha ha ha. Yeah, he do. Anyway, a couple of housekeeping items. Shanae's Lore is now on Instagram and Facebook. Be sure that you go ahead over there and like those pages. Now, moving on into today's story. In episode 4 of the Haunted Hometown Horror Story series, okay, I'm about to drop the accent. We will be talking about another horrifying true story that occurred in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Now, this episode is actually going to be about the John Brown Tavern, also known as the Brown Tavern or the Ferry Brown Tavern, depending on who you speak to. And we will be going over the horrifying events that transpired there. Now, they say that the Brown Ferry Tavern was built around 1803. And some say that it is actually the oldest home in Chattanooga, Tennessee. It was actually built in that region before it was even called Chattanooga. In fact, it is located in the Lookout Valley region of Tennessee and was built prior to Chattanooga even getting its name, before it was even founded.
Okay, now that my fangs are out, let me take this time to educate you all on the history of Ross's Landing. Now, Ross's Landing, which eventually was renamed by the European settlers to Chattanooga, Tennessee, is actually a Native American name. So Chattanooga derives from a Creek Native American word, chato, which means rock. And in this case, it referred to a rock coming to a point. It was named that due to it being placed along the Lookout Mountain Range, which spans 88 miles through Alabama and Georgia. Now, the word Tennessee derives from two separate Native American languages, including the Creek and the Cherokee, which originates from the word Tennessee and was named after the Tennessee River. The name was combined to the two Native American tribes, including the Cherokee Indians, being on its banks. In fact, a British map from 1755 originally labeled the region as the River of Cherokees. However, it actually earned another nickname, the Volunteer State, due to the large amount of volunteers that answered the request of Governor Blunt's request for volunteers for the War of 1812. Ross's Landing is now recognized as the last site of the Cherokee's 61-year-old occupation of Chattanooga, and it is also a notable point of where the Cherokee were removed from this area on its notorious Trail of Tears. It is now located at Riverfront Park on the opposite side of Coolidge Park and across the street from the Tennessee Aquarium. Now let's do a quick history breakdown. Now, the landing in the area was named after an alleged principal Cherokee Nation chief named John Ross. John Ross was a mixed race man. His mother was a Cherokee Native American and his father was a Scottish European man. However, during this time, the mother's tribe was matrilineal and considered the child of the Cherokee woman to be Cherokee as well. He also participated in the War of 1812 and worked directly under Andrew Jackson. Around 1816, he decided to settle in between the Chattanooga Creek and Tennessee River. It eventually became a trading post from the northern portion of the Cherokee Nation to across the country. The area had a few nicknames such as Ross's Warehouse, Ross's Ferry. By the way, Ross operated a ferry boat which he anchored on a McClellan Island, but ultimately Ross's Landing was the most popular name and it actually stuck. For passerbyers, it was preferred due to it being well known for having the best conditions for a river flatboat crossing through. When 1826 rolled around, Ross decided to sell the land to a Methodist minister named Nicholas Dalton Scales. He decided to sell because he wanted to move to Georgia, where the Cherokee Nation held its political center. However, in 1837, the government took over the Cherokee-owned lands and began to quote-unquote remove them against their wills from their homes in the southeastern states of the United States. The notorious voyage was known as the Trail of Tears. During this time, groups of Native Americans were hosted at various camps while waiting for their western journey to begin. One of these camps included Ross's Landing. In fact, on June 6, 1838, there was 1,500 Cherokees reported to have been deported from Ross's Landing via steamboats and barges. However, the last group of Cherokees left in the fall of 1838, but they did not leave in a boat. They were forced to walk due to the failing levels of water in the river due to a drought at the time. This resulted in a western march, which caused several hundred Cherokee lives to be lost, which included Ross's wife at the time, Quakey. Once they were removed, the European settlers took over the lands completely and changed the name of the area from Ross's Landing to Chattanooga. Present day, Ross's Landing has become a site listed on the National Register of Historic Places since 1974. It is currently serving as a memorial at the Riverfront Park along the Tennessee River. During the spring months of 2005, there was an effort to spend $61 million to improve the Tennessee public parks, which included redeveloping Ross's Landing Park. This remodeling included a pathway for pedestrians that connect Ross's Landing to Tennessee Aquarium, and our installation along the walkway that contained symbolizations from the actual path that the Cherokees were forced to take during the relocation to Oklahoma. These illustrations were created by a group of 5 Cherokee artists called the Ganduji, and their works displayed large carved and glazed clay medallions into the walkway walls. Per Cherokee history, the medallions represent various aspects of their past, including religious beliefs and the problems they faced with the white settlers that forced them out of their lands.
There was a man that was known to be one of the first settlers to live in that area and occupied it for many years. His name was John Brown, and this story is about him. Now, for those of you who kind of want to know what a tavern is an establishment that serves alcoholic beverages and actually allows them to stay there to consume those alcoholic beverages. It's sort of like a pub. The John Brown Tavern was actually a 2-story log cabin that housed guests during voyages. It was kind of like an old school Airbnb or a breakfast in bed, if you will. So, who was John Brown and why are we discussing him today? Ha ha ha. John Brown was a half Cherokee Indian and half Caucasian man whom was a key player and a captain in the War of 1812. Side note, the War of 1812 was actually a war that took place between 1812 and 1814. The war took place between the United States and its allies against the United Kingdom, Ireland, and their allies. However, the war actually ended in a stalemate, and in 1815, the United States signed a treaty in the month of February to go ahead and just end the war. Now, a lot of historians will tell you firsthand that the Native Americans that were involved in this ordeal were done dirty, and nothing good came out of this for them. So, let's just keep that in mind with the story. It's also important to go ahead and note that John Brown was actually the brother-in-law of Chief John Ross. Now, if you're familiar with John Ross, you'll know that he is the founder of Ross's Landing, which was the original name of Chattanooga, Tennessee, before it was founded in 1838 by that name. Brown is also known to be a part of the notorious Trail of Tears. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. However, it is said that Brown eventually made his way back to Chattanooga and ultimately died there. Now, as an adult, Brown actually made a living by transporting people over the Tennessee River on his ferry boat, and he would often take them across the river to his tavern. While a lot of people believe that Brown was a stand-up guy, others say that he actually lived a double life with a quite actually disturbing dark side to his personality. Now let's go ahead and talk about the dark side of John Brown. It is believed that Brown actually robbed and murdered most of the wealthy passengers that he carried over to stay at the tavern. This was common because there was a lot of rich people that traveled to visit his tavern, so it's not far-fetched. The legend also states that Brown would kill his passengers and dump their bodies and their wagons in the Tennessee River. Now, he would often justify a lot of these killings by saying that the people ran out of the tavern in the middle of the night. I guess he was trying to say they were trying to run off without paying him. There's also reports that say that Brown confessed to hiding some of the bodies of his victims in a cave in the Raccoon Mountains, as well as down some random wells that he just found. Some also question the location of the tavern due to it being located directly along the Trail of Tears, National Historic Trail. Consequently, it's said that a lot of Native Americans and others were staying at the tavern or near it prior to their march against their wills. So it was like a pit stop for a lot of those Native Americans that had to be forced on that journey towards the west. Mind you, we did talk about the War of 1812. Moving on. At the time of Brown's death, it is believed that he was actually buried somewhere on the property around the 1840s. However, his exact grave location remains unknown to this day. But some of the previous owners were kind of iffy about having certain things built around the area. For instance, there was talks about getting a softball field built in certain areas around the cabin. It is reported that they opted to not have the softball field built in certain locations because his body was actually underneath the grounds. Present day, the tavern is currently not open to the public because it is privately owned. An article dated for 10/1/2016 in the Chattanooga Times Free Press stated that the tavern opened up for ghost hunters for the first time in over 50 years. These hunts were hosted by a company in the city called the Chattanooga Ghost Tours. It is believed that the ghosts that haunt the tavern are actually the victims of Brown's murdered victims. They are said to still hunt these grounds to this very day. For the last few decades, many previous owners of the property and visitors have reported paranormal activity on the property. Now, internet reports also mention that there are blood stains on the floor of the tavern that cannot be removed. Others stated that the visitors claimed to hear chains dragging and thumping sounds of the ghosts when they were victims. So apparently a lot of these actual victims have been chained up at some point of their visit. Brown was actually thought to have tortured a lot of his victims before he actually murdered them and dumped them down those mountainsides and into those wells and also into the river. Now, at this time, some say that 38 people have been murdered on the actual property. Conflicting stories say that there's at least 42 that have been murdered and possibly buried, or their bodies were dumped somewhere near, on, or around the tavern. Mind you, he did dump a lot of those bodies in the river too. Now, although John Brown's body nor his grave have actually ever been found, many people also believe that he haunts these grounds as well. Now, not only did he take advantage of people who were forced to leave their homes, remember we spoke a little bit in episode 3 about on the bluff of Chattanooga, the haunted museum, where the Indians were removed from the area, predominantly the Cherokee Indians, or Native Americans to be more politically correct. How those Native Americans were removed away, a lot of this has to take place with that. This is the 4th story where we talked about a war, most of the Civil War, and now we're discussing more Native Americans being removed from their homes for sadistic reasons. So it wouldn't surprise me to this day that the people that are haunting that land were those victims. He took advantage of people who were already going through troubled times. And we all know people that die bad don't stay in the ground, beloved. All right, that's going to go ahead and conclude this video. Make sure that you go ahead and like, subscribe, and share the video. I will be going on to do 2 bonus episodes of the Haunted Hometown Horror Stories just for you, because there were so many haunted and demonic places in Chattanooga, and I was reading and doing all this research. It only makes sense to go ahead and talk about two more so you can understand the dark, twisted history of that city, which is why the energy is probably so bad right now. Thank you all so much for watching. Until next time, protect your energy or I might bite you. And a one and a two and a three. Ha ha ha.